When a young couple split shortly after the birth of their child, no one could have foreseen the bloodshed that would follow. The mother moved on, finding love again with an American man and dreaming of a new life across the ocean. But when she made plans to relocate their child to the United States, the child's father fought back. He rejected her court application and demanded that his son remained in the country. Tensions soared. Then, in a shocking twist, her own father, fueled by rage and a dangerous sense of justice, took matters into his own hands. Within 1 hour, both the baby's father and his own father were gunned down in cold blood at their own homes. What began as a custody battle spiraled into a chilling tale of vengeance and double murder. It's early 2016 when Samantha Stephen and Joshua Dunmore decide to go their separate ways. Though they had recently welcomed a child into the world, the relationship had run its course. Feelings had faded on both sides, and the decision to part ways, while difficult, felt inevitable. As time moved on, so did their lives. Samantha eventually found love again, this time with Paul Stephen, a member of the United States Air Force stationed at RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk as part of his overseas assignment. Their romance blossomed, and by 2020, Samantha and Paul had tied the knot, officially starting a new chapter together. At this point, everything seemed stable. Joshua was still very much involved in his child's life, so he didn't have anything to worry about when it came to Samantha's marriage. That was until Paul received orders to return to the United States, an inevitable call from the Air Force that the couple had long anticipated. By then, Samantha and Paul had already begun having conversations about what this move could mean for their future. The idea of relocating to Paul's hometown in Ohio was on the table, and not just for the two of them. Samantha's young son from her previous relationship with Joshua was also part of those early discussions. It wasn't set in stone, but the possibility of a transatlantic move was becoming more real by the day. What no one knew at the time was just how much that possibility would soon turn into a point of conflict, and how it would set off a tragic chain of events that no one saw coming. Determined to make the move a reality, Samantha agreed to relocate to Ohio with Paul. But there was one major obstacle standing in the way: Joshua. As the biological father of her son, she knew the conversation wasn't going to be easy, and when she finally broke the news to him, it went exactly as she feared. The idea of his son being taken thousands of miles away shattered any sense of calm he'd held on to. He refused, outright and immediately, to allow Samantha to leave the country with their child. For Joshua, it wasn't just about distance. It was about losing his frequent role in his son's life. The thought alone tipped him over the edge. And from that moment on, the situation began to spiral. But Samantha was determined to get her way. In her mind, the decision was made. She was moving to the US, and she was taking her son with her. It didn't matter how firm Joshua's stance was. She was going to pursue what she believed was best for her new family. Joshua, however, wasn't about to stand by and watch his son be taken from him without a fight. When Samantha formally applied through the family court for permission to relocate the child to the United States, Joshua immediately opposed it. He pushed back hard, relentlessly, determined to make the court see just how deeply he cared for his son and how devastating it would be to lose that connection. What followed was a tense and emotionally charged custody battle, one that would push both parents to their limits and eventually lead to devastating consequences. Samantha was devastated. What was supposed to be the start of a new life with her husband was now tangled in bitter courtroom disputes. The dream of relocating to Ohio was slipping further from her grasp with every passing court date, and behind the scenes, tensions were only growing. Her father, Stephen Alderton, was furious. He couldn't stand the thought of anyone, especially Joshua, getting in the way of his daughter's happiness. As the legal battle dragged on, Stephen made his feelings crystal clear. Samantha was going to get what she wanted, no matter what it took. In a disturbing series of messages, Stephen didn't hold back. He warned that if the court sided with Joshua, he would personally override any decision made. "There's always a plan B," he wrote ominously. But it didn't stop there. In perhaps the most chilling message of all, Stephen Alderton revealed a dark and deadly intent. It was no longer just a custody dispute. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. Stephen Alderton's intentions were no longer hidden. They were crystal clear. This wasn't just anger or frustration. It was premeditation. If the court ruled against his daughter's plans, Stephen was ready to take matters into his own hands, with deadly force. Joshua wasn't his only target. Stephen had expanded his sights to include Joshua's father as well. 2 lives he now saw as obstacles standing in the way of Samantha's future, and he began making moves that suggested he wasn't bluffing. Stephen started driving past their homes, watching, planning. He even went as far as taking photographs of both Joshua's and his father's houses, collecting details, observing routines. Every move he made painted a darker picture. This wasn't idle talk. It was a man on the edge, slowly and methodically preparing for something horrifying. The day of the crucial court hearing had arrived. The moment that would determine whether Samantha could take her child to the United States with her. Joshua was there, seated and resolute, still unwavering in his belief that his son should remain in England, close to his father and the life he knew. Though this wasn't the final ruling in the case, it was a pivotal step. After careful consideration, the court delivered its decision. The child was not to be relocated to the United States. For now, he would remain in England, where he could continue his relationship with Joshua. For Samantha, the decision was a devastating blow. For Joshua, it was a moment of relief. But for Stephen Alderton, it was the spark that lit the fuse. This was the outcome he had warned against. And now, with the court siding against his daughter, at least temporarily, Stephen's threats were no longer just words. The storm was no longer brewing. It was about to break. Joshua was buzzing. The court's decision had given him exactly what he'd hoped for: more time with his son, and the chance to keep building the bond that meant everything to him. But while Joshua was making plans for Easter, Samantha's father was making plans of his own. Stephen was quietly setting the wheels in motion for what he saw as justice. Only this wasn't about the law anymore. This was about revenge. Stephen wasn't just planning a murder. He was preparing a double execution. Stephen Alderton was up early. Since the passing of his wife, he had been living out of a camper van, having sold the family home. Quiet, isolated, and mobile, it gave him space, and more importantly, it gave him cover. Inside that unit, alongside various personal belongings, was something far more dangerous: a legally owned Beretta shotgun and a supply of ammunition. Stephen grabbed the weapon. He didn't return it to storage. He didn't lock it away. Instead, he kept it with him. From the storage unit, Stephen began stalking his targets. He first drove to both Joshua's and Gary Dunmore's homes. He didn't act, not yet. He simply watched, waiting, calculating. Then, he met up with Samantha and her husband at a McDonald's in nearby St. Ives. A casual meeting in a public place, all while he carried a loaded shotgun in his vehicle. From there, he made his way back to 65-year-old Gary Dunmore's home in the quiet village of Sutton. He sat outside, watching as Gary returned home from work. Still, he did nothing, just observed. But the calm was deceptive. The silence wasn't hesitation. It was timing. Just after 9 p.m., Stephen returned to Joshua's home. This time, he wasn't there to watch. With the shotgun now loaded and ready, Stephen stepped out of his car, walked up to Joshua's front door, and knocked. Joshua answered, and in a split second before he could even process what was happening, Stephen raised the gun and fired. A blast to the chest, another to the head. Joshua was killed instantly. But Stephen wasn't done. Roughly 28 minutes later, he arrived back at Gary's home in Sutton. There, on the quiet road, he shot at Gary 4 times and hit him with 3 of those shots. Both shootings were heard and reported by horrified neighbors. Within minutes, the emergency lines lit up. Armed police units, helicopters, and ambulances swarmed both villages. But despite rapid response and desperate efforts to save them, both Joshua and Gary were pronounced dead at the scene. The police launched an immediate investigation, and it didn't take long to identify their suspect. Stephen had been seen fleeing the scene. Neighbors had witnessed the vehicle he used. Everyone knew it was him. The manhunt began. Officers quickly surrounded the site where Stephen had been storing his camper van, but he wasn't there. Automatic number plate recognition cameras were activated to track his movements. The net tightened, and less than 2 hours after the cold-blooded murders, armed police were closing in fast.
Okay, we'll light it up now then. Hold. Vehicle slowing, stand by, stop. Oh please! You! Get out of the corner! You can see her! Get out of the vehicle now! Walk towards me! Keep walking towards me! Towards me! Get down on the ground!
Put your hands out now! Hands out! Put your hands behind your back!
Stephen Alderton was successfully apprehended. His run was over. Inside his vehicle, police found exactly what they feared: the murder weapon, a Beretta shotgun, and a box of ammunition. There was no denying it. The evidence was overwhelming. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and immediately remanded into custody. In court, Stephen Alderton pleaded guilty to both murders. The judge handed him a life sentence with a minimum term of 25 years. But given the cold-blooded nature of the killings and the premeditation involved, that sentence was later increased to a minimum of 30 years behind bars. As for Samantha and her husband Paul, who had been arrested shortly after Stephen's capture, they were later released and faced no further action. Authorities determined they had no direct involvement in the murders, but the tragedy didn't end in the courtroom. Joshua's young son, just 7 years old at the time of the murders, was removed from Samantha's custody and placed into care. The trauma and uncertainty surrounding his future added another layer of heartbreak to an already devastating situation. For 15 long months, Joshua's mother, Mandy Seamark, fought tirelessly for custody of her grandson. She refused to let the final piece of her son's legacy slip away. Eventually, her fight paid off. In a heartfelt and emotional post shared on Facebook, Mandy confirmed that she had finally been granted custody, a reflection of a grandmother's unbreakable love and a promise to protect what remained of her son's memory. A bitter custody battle, a father's love, and a grandfather's rage. What began as a dispute over a child's future ended in unthinkable tragedy. 2 lives were stolen. A young boy was left without his father, and a family shattered forever. Justice may have been served, but the scars remain. This story is a haunting reminder of how far some will go when obsession takes hold, and how, in the end, it's the innocent who pay the highest price.